Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Tell Your Story. I'm your host, Todd Nesloni, the Director of Culture and Strategic Leadership at TEPSA. And each episode, I look to bring you a different guest who has encouraged, inspired, or challenged me in one way or another and bring them on to share some of their story in hopes that it inspires you to share some of yours. I'm thrilled today for my special guest, Joseph Lento, on with me. Joseph, tell everybody kind of who you are.
Well, thanks so very much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. Thanks so very much. I'm a school teacher. Been teaching since 1984. I'm a conservatory trained musician, and I've had a ball teaching all these years, and I still love doing it.
I've got so many questions for you, so I'm just going to jump right in. So, I always love starting these conversations with, when we're kids, we have these big dreams of what we want to be when we grow up. Was educator one of those dreams, or did that just come about later?
It came on pretty early. When I was about 5 years old, I had seen Louis Armstrong on TV, on an old big black and white TV set, and I said, I want to do that. And my living room's like a shrine to Satchmo. And when I wasn't able to get a trumpet until I was in the 6th grade because we were poor, we didn't have access. But the school I attended, and because I had good grades, I was able to play in the beginning band. And I got my first trumpet in the 6th grade. And I wanted to become a teacher from that point on.
I love that. So, before you got access to your first instrument, when did you kind of feel that draw towards the arts, the music?
Well, we always had a house full of music. So music was always going on in the house. But it wasn't until that day I saw Louis Armstrong and I saw him playing that trumpet. And I said I want to do that.
Uh-huh.
That's what I wanted to do.
Now, was it always because of Louis Armstrong? Was it always the trumpet, or did you have an interest in some other instruments right off the bat too?
No, it was always the trumpet.
I love that. I love that when you see something as a kid and you're so into it, you're like, nope, I was driven from that moment forward. And so
Yes.
you go to school to become an educator, and did you know that no matter what, that music and band or whatever was going to be your avenue in education? Or did you also kind of like toy with the idea of, I may want to teach some things outside of the arts?
Well, I actually had a really good experience, and early on, not by design, but by necessity. In addition to studying music, I also had a minor in history. And when I was available to start teaching, music jobs were scarce. So I actually started teaching social studies to special education children.
Oh, wow.
And I started my first band with the kids in my global studies class back in 1985, actually.
Uh-huh. That's amazing. I love that. And so, you've been doing education for quite a while now. What do you feel like is one of the biggest things you've learned about yourself since becoming a teacher?
Is that you can always find different ways to get through to kids, and also, different ways to get through to yourself. Because sometimes you say, I've been doing it this way, and maybe I should do it a different way. So to try different things, it's very important.
I love that. Well, Joseph, you've also got some accolades and been recognized in some fantastic ways. And so which one of those experiences really stands out in your memory as something you were really proud of?
Well, that's very kind of you to say that. I think that having had the opportunity to teach so many kids and in such diverse backgrounds, and really seeing each student as an opportunity to do for them what was done for me. And through just sharing music, I was recognized by, a few presidents, senators, and I really think it's just because of them it happened to me, not because of, what I was doing, but people noticed it and I'm grateful for that. But, the work with the kids has always been the most rewarding and satisfying thing for me.
I love that you share that because, I felt the same way. Those recognitions are great and they're awesome in the moment. But in the end, it's like the stuff you always look most fondly on are those experiences with the kids. When you reflect on your own kind of childhood and experience in education, what was school like for you growing up?
I loved it. School was a home away from home and sometimes better than home.
Yeah.
I was just so blessed and fortunate. We had a great group of kids, grew up in a diverse area. We were all poor. We were all of different colors, and we didn't know the difference. We just loved being with each other, and the teachers were just absolutely great. I mean, seriously, growing up in the Bronx in the late 60s and 70s, um, we had some fabulous schools in New York City and wonderful teachers, and I owe so many of them a big debt that I could never repay.
And speaking of New York, that's still the area you reside in today, correct?
I'm just a few miles north of where I was born and raised.
Wow.
Uh, I was born and raised in the Bronx, and about 20 years ago, I was about almost 40. I moved up to Dobbs Ferry because I had started teaching in Yonkers,
Mhm.
and I was, trying to expand my horizons. And I had already spent a significant amount of time in New York City, both as a teacher and an administrator.
Mhm.
And I thought I might want to spread my wings a little bit. And it was, a little frightening at first because you know what you know, and but I moved closer to where I was working.
I love that. So, you're going through the same thing everybody else around the world is right now, with our whole lives being in upheaval and learning a new way of educating and things like that. And so, and you're also very close to a national spotlight of where everybody's looking down about what's going on. And so, being an educator in that area during these times, what have you really been learning, not only about you, but about your students and your career?
Well, I have to tell you, like you and lots of other folks, I was apprehensive
Mhm.
about it. Um, and it depends on what population of students you're serving.
Right.
This can this situation has proved not to be the greatest for people who might not have the same access to
Right.
technology. So that's been a challenge for them, a challenge for me and my peers, and folks all over the country. Um, but for the students I am connecting with, and I use mostly Zoom, I find that they're actually more focused. For the ones who are participating, the focus seems to be sharper.
Yeah.
And I can't say that's everyone else's experience, but also you have to come up with more creative ways to hold their attention.
Yeah.
And so I generally find that I'm always mixing in, conversations along with my teaching, but I find that I'm asking them actually more about themselves,
Right.
how they're feeling, that I generally have an opportunity to do. So I can kind of address that socio-emotional need if they have it.
I love that. I love that there are those, in the midst of all of this, so there may be things that are frustrating and overwhelming, and there's always these good little pockets of things happening as well. And so I love that you share that about how this has had a bright side for you in the midst of all the upheaval and crazy and stuff. You still have found some ways that this has really kind of helped you grow and connect with your students in a new way also. And so, when you reflect on your own life, and you look back over the things you've been through, Joseph, and the successes, but the failures, the positives and the heartbreaks, and when you reflect over the things that have happened to create the man we see today, what is one thing that really stands out in your mind that was really instrumental into playing a part in who you are today?
That's a difficult question to answer.
Yeah, I know there's lots of answers to this one. I understand.
No, 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 that's fine. And um, you always want to be as honest with you can as you can about yourself. So let me answer it by saying, if I think there's one thing that defines me, both as a man, as an educator, if we can combine those two things, is that, and this might not be popular, but I've always bucked the system for the betterment of my students.
Right.
And that has taken, you get some scars from that,
Mhm.
but you realize when you're in it for the kids. And sometimes it means having some, controversies with adults. But if you know you're always doing something that's beneficial for the children you serve, I think that's the best thing an educator can do, is to fight for the kids all the time, even if it's not the most popular decision
Mhm.
at the moment. So I think that defines me.
I love that. And, I can totally associate with what you're saying because, I think that we look at those things and we know that we're doing it for the kids. Like that's our whole reason and reason for being. And, you have had so many neat experiences and opportunities. But in the midst of all that, what I found through these tell your story conversations is that regardless of how successful someone is or the things they're getting to be a part of, there still is always that element of doubt or comparison, or am I the right person to be doing this? And so what do you do to keep doubt at bay so that it doesn't take root in your own life?
Well, if I may, I think a healthy amount of doubt makes us more acutely aware of what we need to be and
I
what we
agree.
need to be in the moment. And I've always relied on those who've been most instrumental to me. There's a handful of people in my life who I can count on for the lessons they taught me. And there isn't a moment that I don't walk into the classroom where I don't carry those people, former teachers of mine, with me at all moments, because I need to rely on what they taught me to get through every day.
I love that. Well, as a performer and somebody who is on the trumpet often, do you have a favorite piece you like to play?
I get asked this all the time. I generally don't have a good answer for it, but probably if you said, what's the piece of music you want to play for everybody, or you want, when you die, what do you want played? I think the song might be Besame Mucho. I have a favorite live recording I did maybe 20 years ago of it. It's such a simple piece, but it's so elegant and expressive, and you can do so many things with it. So if I had to choose one piece to perform, it'd probably be Besame Mucho.
I love that. And if there was an instrument that you were to learn to play besides the trumpet, what would be a goal instrument of yours?
Um, well, to be a much better piano player than I am, but I'd love to have played the violin or the cello, professionally. I only know it well enough to teach book one. I've had, school districts approach me, would you teach this and that? And, woodwind and brass instruments, I'll teach any level, anytime, but you have to know your limits. Book one on strings is as far as I'll go, and I'll beg to get a substitute in as quickly as possible.
I love that. You've got to know your limits. So, you can introduce the basics, but when you want somebody further, I love that. Violin has been one of those instruments that I have always found as just being a gorgeous instrument, especially when I can just, when those pieces come up, there's so many instruments that are so unique. And what do you feel like is one of the most difficult instruments for kids to learn?
Um, you know, you're asking a question that the students ask me for 35 years. What instrument should I choose? What's the easiest? And because they're overwhelmed, they see these instruments. And that is always an individual question. But from just strictly an observational point of view, initially, the clarinet is very difficult because they can't cover the holes. That's very difficult for young kids. Brass instruments, I find, have always proven ultimately the most difficult for the students as they go through, elementary through high school.
I love that. And I love that you share that, it really is, it's different for every kid. And it all depends on their want to pour into that instrument and what they're going to choose to learn. And I love you have so many great things that you're sharing here that I'm just like, I don't even play an instrument. I don't even play an instrument right now, but I want to go pick one up and learn it now.
Terrific. Which one do you want here?
I know you've got quite the options behind you for sure.
Yeah. Because, I also teach privately. So I have every instrument that I teach. My flute isn't out though, I don't think. But yeah, you'll notice no string instruments.
Yeah, I was going to say, I noticed that. Yep.
And
Well,
no string
Joseph,
instruments.
you've had an opportunity to play in a lot of fantastic places. What has been one of your favorite places to play?
Um, the place that was my most favorite, I only had one opportunity to do this, mind you, was way back. I was in the New York City Old City High School Orchestra, and we had the opportunity to perform side by side with the members of the New York Philharmonic Orchestra
Oh,
at Lincoln Center. So that is still my most favorite experience playing the trumpet. And I was privileged enough. I studied with several of the gentlemen in the trumpet section in the ensuing years. So that was my absolute favorite all-time place to have performed.
That I'm jealous. And that would be, I mean, that'd be great just to go and join as a participant and listen, but to be able to play next to them and in that beautiful center, I mean, that's amazing. Well, Joseph, one question I always love to end all these conversations on is I believe as people, there are a lot of things that we hold really close to our hearts, who we are, what we believe in. And so for anybody who might be listening or watching today, if there was one thing they walked away with, what would your one thing be?
To not be worried when you have doubt, but to embrace it as a signal for the things you just need to focus on and find strength in weakness. I've often found strength in the times I felt weak or vulnerable. That's when I realized how many people had influenced my life, and just to sit back and draw on all those people and don't worry about the doubt. It's like I always tell the kids, don't worry about if the note is right or wrong. Just do your best. Eventually it will work.
I love that. That's great. Well, Joseph, I was so excited when you agreed to come and chat with me today. So thank you so much for giving me a few minutes of your time.
It's my pleasure, and thank you so much. And everyone stay safe and well.
And thank you everybody for listening or watching another episode of Tell Your Story. Remember, you can check out past episodes on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you get your stuff, it's there. I hope today's conversation with Joseph has encouraged you to get out there and tell your story, because every story matters.